Fearscapes by Michael Powell. Audio log 347. Attempt number 61. Dr. Brenner speaking. The glitch Dr. Adams discovered was not because of a disconnect in the neural interface. I checked and double-checked every connection and found everything to be wired properly. Thus, I have theorized that the reason for the interface shutting down when the user enters the dream state is simply because the vast inner workings of our mind is simply too much for one person to comprehend. As such, I've designed a new component to add to the machine. A sort of guide to filter the information through and allow us to access it in more manageable chunks. I've designed an AI capable of performing this complex task. However, I had some trouble connecting to the interface. Eventually, I realized the problem. I needed a way to connect the AI to the mind so that it would manifest a physical form in the dreamscape. I eventually decided that the best connection was to tie the AI to an emotion. Emotions are some of our strongest influencers, and as such, the AI should have no problem binding to the strongest one we exhibit. I believe that it will either bond to the passion of my work or the love I have for my family. I will now begin testing. Dr. Brenner clicked end recording and leaned back in his chair. He eyed the machine that stood in the center of the room. With a shining steel body covered in veiny wires, the Zephyr 2000 looked like something out of a science fiction novel. It was certainly named that way due to the leading scientist having an unfortunate infatuation with Star Trek. But the most impressive piece of equipment was also the most plain, a simple helmet, fitted with a few million tiny sensors that were able to pick up any and all brain activity and translate it into a virtual experience accessed through dreams. There was no point in delaying the test any longer. After checking and double-checking to make sure the machine would administer an electric shock to wake him either when his heart rate rose too high or a code word, Xanthar, was uttered, he was ready to go. Yet, as he reached up to pick up the helmet, still he hesitated, unsure of exactly what it was that was holding him back. Then, remembering the countless possibilities this technology created, he picked up the helmet and slipped it on his head, filled with determination. He administered a sedative, reclined in his chair, and drifted off to sleep. When he opened his eyes, he was laying in the middle of a vast, dark plain, with no memory of who he was, where he was, or how he got there. He got to his feet, struggling to recall a semblance of something, anything that would give him some clue about where he was. He scrounged through his seemingly empty head, desperately trying to figure out who he was, where he was, how he got here. Slowly, it all started to come back to him. My name is Dr. Leland Brennan. I'm married. I have 4 kids and a dog named Butch. I'm in the mindscape, testing out whether or not the Zephyr 2000 works, he said in a breathing sigh of relief. It looks like it does. Dr. Leland? Leland whirled around to see a pair of floating green eyes, and a Cheshire grin appeared out of the darkness. It took me a moment to collect all the available data, and as such, I was unable to provide you with a basic level of knowledge for a moment. Were you disoriented? I'm sorry, but... Of course, Dr. Leland. Suddenly the dark, endless void turned into a void of endless white, and Leland was able to examine his guide in greater detail. He was confused to find his guide was a humanoid cat, covered from head to toe in black fur. She was dressed in a pink tank top and jeans, and looked to be around 18 years old. 2 massive pointed ears lay on top of her head, and her poison green eyes were so large that they may as well have been globes. You're right. I am not your wife or one of your colleagues, she continued before he could form the words to form a question. Let me pull up a memory for you to show exactly what I represent. Wait, no. I remember now. Your passion. If you say so, she said. You're letting me talk now? He asked. She shrugged. It was one of your thoughts. You were annoyed by me answering questions you didn't get the chance to ask. Leland startled. You mean you can see exactly what's happening in my mind? Currently as well? Yes. I am also able to control exactly which thoughts you see. This is the way you programmed me, Doctor. Call me Leland, please. Of course. Leland. But what should I call you? He muttered to himself. A suggestion, Leland? Yes. Call me Zelda. It's a name that helps put you at ease, if it's simply mentioned. Thank you, Zelda. Of course. Leland thought for a moment before asking his next question. So, what is it exactly that you recommend that I do? Perhaps something that will make you a little more comfortable in your surroundings. For instance, Zelda snapped her fingers and a comfortable sofa came into existence. Leland looked at it with some surprise before settling into its cushions. I suppose I should try out a test run, at least. Are you able to play the memory of last week's luncheon? As clearly as you remember it, Zelda said, snapping her fingers again. A large widescreen TV appeared in front of him, suspended by nothing for a moment before falling to the ground and shattering into a million pieces. Leland jumped and glared at Zelda, who simply shrugged. Reality here isn't what you know it. What you think should happen is what actually happens. If you were to believe that penguins fly, penguins would be able to fly here. You expected that TV to fall. It's not my fault. It's yours for having such realistic expectations. I don't remember programming you with such sass, Leland muttered. Of course you don't. I control your memories, remember? Oh, wait, Zelda said with a smirk. Leland groaned. Can you just make a freestanding TV instead? Very well, but you're no fun, she said with a humph, snapping her fingers again to create what it was Leland asked, a large, freestanding TV that was big enough to make it look like it belonged in a movie theater. Leland settled into the couch and fumbled around for a remote for a moment before he realized where he was. Can you... could you... please? Fine. Just remember, I'm not your personal assistant. She snapped her fingers again and a remote formed in his hands. He pressed play and watched as the memories unfold before him. As it does, Zelda joins him on the couch, watching the event unfold with some interest. Instead of a long, in-depth movie that he thought he would get, Leland was shocked to find his memory was more of a summary, a highlight reel of insight, random jokes, and overall a jumbled mess of editing that would make any moviegoer cringe. When it was finally over, Leland couldn't move. Zelda glanced at him. You don't look so good, she stated obviously. Was that it? He asked. What were you expecting? A play-by-play of every single event? This is your mind we're talking about. If you remember every single thing that happened to you, there would be no room for stuff like calculations and equations. And your other big brain knowledge. You know how this works, Leland. Leland sighed. You're right. So, what can you do then? He asked. Zelda shrugged. Plenty. Plenty you wouldn't like, and plenty that you would. And plenty that would be good for you, that you would never agree to. At that, Leland perked up. And what exactly would I not want to do? He asked curiously. Zelda waved the question away. Why should I bother telling you if you aren't going to do it anyway? You're here for research, are you not? Looking at the process by which the brain functions and all that? Please, Zelda. The AI sighed and leaned further onto the couch. Imagine your mind is like a computer whose storage is always close to full. It runs okay, but not at its peak performance. There's a bunch of clutter just laying around, and when new data comes in, the hard drive starts to burst. So you gotta delete a few files. Memories, skills, stuff like that. Your point? There's a way to free up more space. In a computer, that means deleting unneeded programs. And in the brain, those unneeded programs are your emotions. You want to what? See? I told you wouldn't like it. No, I'm just confused, Leland said. How are my emotions unneeded programs? Do you really need to cry about your dog dying? Well, do you really need to shriek and yell and get angry at your kids when they do something wrong? Do you really need to feel frustrated because of all your hard work that goes unnoticed? Well, when you put it that way, no. Of course you don't. It's just holding you back from focusing on your work. Think of all the good that you can do, all that you can learn, just by freeing up one emotion or even two. But isn't that kind of bad? I sort of need my emotions to connect with my peers. I don't want to become a psychopath. Look, it's just one emotion. It's nothing earth-shattering. I'll even let you decide which one to let go. Although if I could make a suggestion, greed isn't doing that much to help you out. Leland glanced with surprise at Zelda. Greed? Like one of the deadly sins? Greed? That's the one. You mean I can get rid of specific parts of my emotions? Exactly. Sort of like deleting certain levels of a video game. Leland pondered for a moment. The idea was simple enough, and it was certainly worth a test run or two. Yet something about this felt off. Was there something he was forgetting? He shrugged it off and decided just to go for it. So, how do I get rid of my greed? You have to defeat it. What do you mean? He asked, a little uneasy. I summon it here, and you attack it, and force it to disappear. How? He asked. You have admin privileges here. If you tell greed to leave, it'll listen to you. Really? Yes. Yes. The only problem is that it will attempt to convince you to allow it to stay. There must be no doubt that you want it gone. You're not really a greedy man, though, so you should be fine. Leland nodded. Okay, but could I get a little bit more time to... He stopped mid-sentence, having forgotten what exactly he was going to say. Something wrong? Zelda asked. Leland shook his head. No, I'm fine. Let's do it. Zelda smiled. Excellent, she said, snapping her fingers. Suddenly kneeling before him was a small, dirty, deformed hunchback, crouched over a pile of gold. He looked up. He looked up startled, and let out a horrible shriek when he saw Leland standing over him. Greed buried his face in his hands and started to sob. Please leave me alone. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. He kept repeating those words over and over again. Leland looked at the creature and felt nothing but pity. Then he felt a warm breath on his ear. Remember, no mercy, Zelda whispered in his ear. Leland nodded, gritted his teeth, and cried in as loud a voice as he could. Greed, be gone! I have no use for you! And just like that, the man was gone, vanished without a trace. What? Just like that? Leland said, awed and a little terrified of the power he wielded. Greed was easy to get rid of, because it is a very specific emotion. Something complex like happiness is harder to get rid of. Anyway, how do you feel? A little smarter? Free? Not really. Understandable. Greed really isn't something that you have to deal with, so he was a smaller part of a program. More deleted emotions would make more of a difference. Like what? Well, you mentioned the 7 deadly sins. Why not get rid of all of them? That's, I guess there isn't any harm. It can only do you good. So, why don't we try something like lust? Leland nodded, and together the two worked out to defeat the evil working in his brain. Lust, a woman who was perfect in body and shape. Sloth, an apathetic creature, sitting stock still, glass-eyed as he stared at the edge of the mind. Pride, a man who looked like a god, sitting on a throne dressed in the finest robes. Envy, who was accompanied by an innocent creature, much better off than envy. Gluttony, who came buried underneath a pile of things. And finally, anger, a devil who raged and stamped about with terrifying fervor. But anger too vanished just as easily as the rest. and Leland grew even more uneasy. Something about this felt wrong. It wasn't right to just cast off emotions like they didn't exist. What was changing? And why did all these emotions seem so afraid? Nicely done, Zelda said, snapping him back to reality. Well, reality for the moment. I what? Sorry, lost myself for a minute there, he said, rubbing his eyes. Zelda frowned. You did? Seems you're having second thoughts about this. I just have concerns. Yes? She prompted. This seems wrong. Wrong how? Leland paused. He didn't know. All he knew was that a pipe organ was playing in his chest, building up a steady crescendo that continued to grow louder with every passing moment. I can't... Can I get rid of fear? Fear? Whatever for? The pipe swelling in intensity, sapping oxygen from his lungs to feed their growing dissonance. Please. I just can't take this anymore. Just do it. Please. Zelda looked calmly at his panicked expression, hurt deeply evident in her eyes. Do you really hate me that much? What? Leland was wheezing now, glancing around him as the plain white background began to change into something darker. But your passion, he stammered, backing away from Zelda as the background shifted to pure darkness. No, I'm not. Zelda's green eyes were the only things floating in the darkness. But I know that form. You're the persona of that online artist. The one that I... She didn't create that persona. She simply borrowed the design from something a little more sinister. What are you? You remember your first horror movie as The Shining. It was on at some crazy Halloween party, and you used it as an excuse to get some peace and quiet. However, you actually watched your first horror movie when you were 5 years old. What are you? It was called Night of the Werecat. It starred a rambunctious group of teens on a campout in the middle of a dark forest. All seemed normal, until one group member decided to take a quick bathroom break. The rest of the group decided to investigate when they heard a muffled scream from deep within the woods. They found only a mangled corpse. Worse still, when they got back, they realized that a certain girl was missing. One by one, they were all picked off, each vanishing mysteriously in the night when no one was looking, until only two remained, a boyfriend and a girlfriend. She looked tearfully into his eyes. I don't want to die, she whispered, sobbing shortly before she was torn away from his grasp. He glanced around wildly, fearfully searching for the creature, and he found it. The last thing he saw, a smile of dripping fangs appeared in the dark, and it came flooding back to Leland. Was the bleeding grin of a hungry monster. Leland was sweating now, struggling to calm the symphony playing inside of him. His efforts were only met with failure. As the eyes came closer, the intensity grew, his heartbeat pounded, and he imagined that fear was listening. Of course. I'm always listening, she said. Leland gulped and started to back away. If there was any time to say the... How could he escape from this place? Listen, Leland, I don't want you getting hurt. And all of your thoughts, dreams, and hopes are just leading you down a path to disappointment, heartbreak, suffering. And the few that don't only lead to more endless endeavors, more hopes and dreams that are always destined to leave you disappointed. Fear slipped into the darkness. Leland gasped for air, whirling around like a merry-go-round. He stared into nothingness, trying to find where those eyes had gone. What good will it do you to chase something better when what you have is good enough? Leland desperately tried to summon a shred of hope, a whisper of love, a glance of determination. But there was nothing, only the same pounding melody. The world is a dangerous place, Leland, and I'm the only thing keeping you alive. You don't need anything else. All of your other emotions are just unneeded programs. He felt something stroke his back, and he wheeled around in panic to find Fear's green eyes and terrifying grin. I am the only one that's left, Leland. I'm here for you. I always have been, and I always will be. No, please, I can't live like this, he shrieked, backing away. Fear sighed, sorrow once more pooling into her eyes. After everything I've done for you, you still reject me and despise me. She straightened up. I guess, in the end, it doesn't matter, so long as you are safe. A blazing white pain suddenly filled his head, matching the intensity that filled his heart. Oh, it looks like you're waking up. He doubled over in pain, gripping his head and moaning as it continued only to grow in intensity. Goodbye, Leland, she whispered. Finally, he couldn't take it anymore. He opened his mouth and cried out in pain. His scream followed him back to the waking world, and he yanked the headset off as fast as he could and tossed it aside, not even caring about the damage it sustained. He stumbled out of the chair and fell against the table, waiting for his heart to stop pounding, the melody to stop playing. But it never did. In fact, it only seemed to grow in intensity, his fear driving out every other rational thought in his mind. His thoughts were a river, and trying to think was trying to catch water in his hands. What do I do? Where do I go? How do I make this stop? Leland stumbled to the floor. Who can I call? What's wrong with me? What's going on? He struggled to crawl somewhere, anywhere. Away. How do I make it stop? Please, someone help me. I need help. He slid into the corner and curled up into a ball, but who can I call? No one can help. I'm here all alone. His heart pounded, growing increasingly louder, faster, a drum pounding ever faster, ever harder. What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? Please, someone help. I need help. He tucked his legs against his chest and rocked back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? What do I do? Help! Someone please help. Hey, thanks for sticking to the end. I want to thank Michael Powell for letting me use this story. We were in the same creative writing class, and I had the opportunity to read this story, and I knew I had to have it on this channel. The reason that I asked him was because one of the same reasons that he wrote the story. He says that sometimes fear can disguise itself, even without us knowing it. I have to admit, that's true. I've learned in my own life that things that cause me anxiety and worry turn out just to be a fear, and I just have to acknowledge it sometimes. Michael's currently working on a book he's been writing for a little while, and he's hoping to further his abilities in creative writing. We wish him luck, and I hope to hear from him again. But please, if you enjoyed this story, subscribe so you can help support other authors like Michael. Let's get the word out for this, because the more people that know, the more authors that are helped. And again, thank you.